Welcome to the show, folks. Today, we're diving headfirst into a topic that's both fascinating and freaky as hell: the Nephilim. These aren't your average fairy tale creatures. We're talking about giants, man, straight out of the ancient texts, said to be the offspring of angels and human women. Now, I know what you're thinking: angels hooking up with humans? Sounds like some crazy biblical fan fiction, right? But here's the thing. There's evidence, man. We're talking giant skeletons, strange artifacts, and stories passed down through generations of ancient cultures all over the world. Are these ancient giants still alive today, hiding in the shadows, maybe even pulling the strings? Let's explore the evidence and theories that suggest they might be. Buckle up, folks, because this is where things get really interesting. So, let's start with the physical evidence, the hard stuff. Over the years, there have been countless reports of giant skeletons unearthed all over the globe. We're talking skeletons that would make Shaq look like a point guard. Now, I'm not talking about your average tall dude. These are remains that suggest beings of incredible, almost mythical size. There are stories from Ecuador, where a giant human skeleton, allegedly over 12 feet tall, was discovered in a cave. Then you've got the reports from the early 1900s in Nevada, where miners claim to have found a giant graveyard, with skeletons averaging over 8 feet tall. And these are just a couple of examples. There are literally hundreds of these stories, often accompanied by blurry photographs and eyewitness accounts that'll make your hair stand on end. Of course, the mainstream scientific community tends to dismiss these findings as hoaxes or misinterpretations. They say the bones are from extinct animals or the photos are doctored. And hey, I'm all for skepticism, but some of these cases are pretty compelling, man. Take the Lovelock Cave discoveries, for instance. In the early 20th century, miners found this cave in Nevada filled with artifacts and, you guessed it, giant skeletons. Some were said to be over 8 feet tall with red hair. Now, these weren't just some random bones scattered around, they were carefully buried. And get this, the Paiute Indians in the area have oral histories about red-haired giants they called the Siteka, who they say were cannibalistic and lived in the cave. So, what's the deal? Are these stories just elaborate hoaxes, or is there something more to it? Some researchers believe there's a massive cover-up going on, that governments and powerful institutions are suppressing evidence of giants to maintain control over the historical narrative. They argue that the existence of giants would challenge everything we thought we knew about human history and evolution. It's a wild theory, no doubt, but when you start digging into this stuff, you realize there's a lot we don't know about our past, and the more you learn, the more you realize that sometimes, the craziest stories might just be true. One of the most fascinating things about the Nephilim is how their story echoes across different cultures and time periods. It's not just a Judeo-Christian thing, man. Ancient cultures all over the world have stories of giants, often portrayed as powerful beings with a connection to the gods. Let's start with Norse mythology, which is full of badass giants like the Jotnar. These guys were the primordial beings who existed before the gods and were known for their immense size and strength. They were constantly battling the gods, and their conflicts shaped the cosmos. Then you have the Greeks, with their tales of the Titans, like Atlas, who held up the sky. These guys were the children of Gaia and Uranus, the earth and sky, and they were eventually overthrown by Zeus and the Olympian gods. But it goes beyond Europe. In the Americas, Native American tribes have stories of red-haired giants who were often cannibalistic and hostile. The Paiute tribe, like I mentioned before, have legends about the Siteka who lived in Lovelock Cave. But these stories are prevalent throughout the Americas, from the Cherokee in the east to the tribes in the Pacific Northwest. And let's not forget the Bible, man. The book of Genesis talks about the Nephilim as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These guys were said to be mighty warriors and giants who roamed the earth before the Great Flood. Even Islamic tradition has stories of giants known as the jinn, who were created from smokeless fire and possess supernatural powers. Some jinn are said to be benevolent, while others are considered malevolent and even demonic. The point is, these stories are everywhere. From the frozen wastelands of Scandinavia to the deserts of the Middle East, from the jungles of South America to the mountains of North America, ancient cultures have passed down tales of giants for millennia. Now, are these stories just myths and legends, or could they be based on real encounters with beings of extraordinary size and power? Could these ancient tales be humanity's way of explaining something they couldn't quite comprehend, a memory passed down through generations? It makes you wonder, man, it makes you wonder. Chapter 3. In our blood, the Nephilim bloodline theory. Now this is where things get really interesting and honestly, a little creepy. There's a theory out there that suggests the blood of the Nephilim didn't disappear with the flood or fade away into myth. Some believe it's still flowing through human veins today, passed down through generations, maybe even influencing the course of history. Think about it. If these beings were the offspring of angels, or some kind of advanced extraterrestrial beings, wouldn't their descendants inherit some of their unique traits? We're talking about potentially superior intelligence, physical prowess, maybe even psychic abilities. Some researchers point to certain bloodlines, particularly among the elite and powerful, that exhibit unusual traits. We're talking about families with a history of exceptional height, longevity, and an almost uncanny ability to acquire power and influence. Now I'm not saying every tall, rich person is descended from giants, but there are some compelling historical figures who fit the bill. Take King Og of Bashan, for example. The Bible describes him as a giant, the last of the Rephaim, with a bed over 13 feet long. Then you've got Goliath, the Philistine giant who went toe-to-toe with a young David. These guys weren't just tall, they were described as having superhuman strength and were feared warriors. And it's not just ancient history. There are plenty of modern-day figures who stand out for their stature and influence. Some researchers point to certain royal families, political dynasties, and even influential figures in the business world who seem to possess an almost unnatural charisma and ability to command. Of course, this theory is highly speculative, and there's no concrete evidence to prove a direct link between these individuals and the Nephilim. But it's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? Could the blood of ancient giants be coursing through the veins of the powerful, influencing the world from the shadows? It's enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about human history and the nature of power. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Woods, Modern-Day Encounters with Giants. So far we've talked about ancient bones, mythical stories, and shadowy bloodlines. But what about the here and now? Are there any credible reports of giant beings roaming the earth today? Well, that's where things get really interesting and honestly, a little creepy. There are countless stories from people all over the world who claim to have encountered strange creatures in remote areas, creatures that defy easy explanation. We're talking about huge, hulking figures, often covered in hair with glowing eyes and a foul stench. Now I know what you're thinking, sounds like Bigfoot, right? And yeah, there's definitely some overlap in the descriptions. But some eyewitness accounts describe creatures that are far larger than your average Sasquatch, beings that are truly gigantic in stature. For example, there are reports from the Pacific Northwest of giant hairy humanoids that tower over trees, leaving massive footprints and emitting blood-curdling screams. Some Native American tribes in the region have stories that go back centuries about these creatures, which they call Sasquatch or Stiaha, meaning wild man. Then you have the Almas, a creature said to inhabit the Caucasus Mountains of Central Asia. The Almas is described as a bipedal primate, similar to Bigfoot, but often much larger, with some reports claiming they can reach heights of 10 feet or more. There are even reports of the Almas interacting with humans, sometimes aggressively, sometimes peacefully. And let's not forget the stories from the Amazon rainforest, where tribespeople speak of the Mapinguari, a creature said to be covered in thick matted hair, with a horrible odor and backward-facing feet. The Mapinguari is said to be incredibly strong and territorial, and some believe it could be a surviving species of giant ground sloth. Now, I'm not saying all these creatures are giants, but the sheer volume of reports, combined with the consistent descriptions of enormous size and strange features, is hard to ignore. Could these be the last remnants of the Nephilim, hiding in the shadows, avoiding contact with modern civilization? Or are they something else entirely? Creatures unknown to science, lurking on the fringes of our awareness? It's a question that continues to fascinate and frighten us. A reminder that there's still so much about our world that we don't understand. Outro giants among us, fact or fiction? So what do you think? Is there convincing evidence that the Nephilim are still among us, hidden in the shadows, their bloodlines woven into the fabric of our world? Or are these stories just that, stories, myths passed down through generations, fueled by our fascination with the unknown? The truth is, there's no easy answer. The evidence is often anecdotal, shrouded in mystery and speculation. But that's what makes this topic so damn interesting, isn't it? It forces us to question what we think we know, to confront the boundaries of our understanding. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing content. We're always exploring the edges of the map, seeking out the truth, no matter how strange or unsettling it might be. Stay curious, my friends.